Welcome to the 12th century. I know it's going to please you, to appease the gods of poetry, as I weave the rhymes in meter. And between the rhymes it's my design to intertwine and teach you the deeper, sweeter features for the eager history beaver. Here's the teaser. Round about this time, the Japanese were replacing their emperor by a shogun, a visionary military promotion, and escaping the Jin in China, Emperor Gaozong fled and founded the dynasty of the Southern Song. The 12th century was meant to be a temple building century. Thanks a lot to Angkor Wat. Quintessentially, sing along, let's not forget the Southern Song Dynasty with their philosophy, technology, and their finest tea. And Saladin, man he was mean, unleashed speedy sieges. Jerusalem had to succumb, but he let them off with a ransom. Thomas of Beckett was murdered, just check it, in holy Canterbury. So Henry II was forced to do penance and answer his adversary. But let's start this century with a temple that whose stupas are abundant with Buddhist statues. Angkor Wat, commissioned by King Sir Yaverman in 1122. There was no braver man from the Empire of Khmer, or Khmer, phonologically they say, which was without doubt, however it's pronounced, an empire which lasted over 600 years, which is longer than Imperial Rome, or the Han Dynasty, but not as long as the Holy Roman, or the Byzantine. Still, 600 years is a bit absurd. I bet you had no idea that Thailand, Laos and Vietnam were once part of Cambodia. Oh, with a moat more than 5 kilometers long, historians have concurred that Angkor Wat is the largest religious structure in the world. So Yaverman originally wished to dedicate the temple to Hindu, to the supreme deity Vishnu. After his death it had to submit to an attack by the Chans, which architecturally led to alternative plans. As Yaverman, who restored it, was pressurized to transform it to a Buddhist temple. His wife was Buddhist, so of course it was adorned with Buddhas of Theravada, yet also with carvings from the Ramayana of Rama defeating the demon Ravana, Hindu epic mixed with Buddhist nirvana. Built from sandstone and laterite, Cambodians can brag about the world's biggest religious structure. It's on their flag. A UNESCO heritage site, it will never disappear, and can boast 2.5 million tourists every single year. Now if you cast your minds back, way back when, to my rapping history of the world part 10, when China was unified by the Song Dynasty, who brought philosophy, technology, and their finest tea, issued banknotes, built a navy, grew rice cultivation, invented gunpowder, making wars much louder, and doubled the population. While this was known as the Northern Song, Taizu of Song, the important one, who conquered China until the Jin Song Wars of 1127 came along, when the Song, pushed south, became the Southern Song, resisting the Jin dynasty with their general Shizong. Shipbuilding made their economy strong, establishing China's first navy with bombs of gunpowder fired by catapults. The Song, with far less sailors than the Jin, were developing paddle-wheeled ships as battleships that were powered by pedaling. On windless days they won 2 battles on the Yangtze River with speedy pedaling and destructive bombs, a victory they could deliver. The Southern Song held back the Jin, but they were both alarmed when a new threat stepped over the steppes, the Mongols, Genghis Khan. But Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan were never meant to be mentioned in this episode. That's another century. The 12th century was meant to be a temple building century. Thanks a lot to Angkor Wat. Quintessentially, sing along, let's not forget the Southern Song Dynasty with their philosophy, technology, and their finest tea. And Saladin, man he was mean, unleashed speedy sieges. Jerusalem had to succumb, but he let them off with a ransom. Thomas of Beckett was murdered, just check it, in holy Canterbury. So Henry II was forced to do penance and answer his adversary. Now, last episode, we got a load of the Fatimid dynasty, who was sweeping through North Africa righteously and violently. Egypt, Sicily, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, Yemen, Pakistan and Syria. Their name it came from Fatima, a daughter of Muhammad, whose husband Ali, Shiites claimed, was the heir that mattered. Well, Saladin was sent to Egypt in 1164 by Nordin, the Zengid ruler, with the purpose to restore Shawwar as the vizier. But when he was assassinated, Saladin, who'd climbed the ranks, didn't procrastinate and, as a Sunni Muslim, undermined the Fatimid dynasty and proclaimed himself the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, finally, but not before a group of assassins decided to unleash several assassination attempts which failed to his relief. For assassin is an Arabic word for user of hashish, or hashashans, as they had a passion for slaughtering stones, strategic fortresses and buttresses, and psychological warfare, and assassination of adversaries, which had seldom been seen before there. In 1187, Raymond III of Tripoli, with Guy of Lusignan, king of Jerusalem officially, were annihilated by the angry army of Saladin for attacks against Muslim caravans at the Battle of Hattin. Having captured every Crusader city, he besieged Jerusalem, for the city was predominantly Jewish and Christian. But rather than slaughter like a band of marauders, they paid for their freedom and demanded from every Frank in the city an unusually low ransom. He let the Jews resettle there without any animosity, for Saladin was fair and famous for his generosity. Learning of Jerusalem, Richard the Lionheart launched the Third Crusade before the Holy Land was pried apart by the infidels. Incidentally, he raised taxes to raise an army, but not before his conquest of Cyprus, which was partly of strategic importance as it lay towards the sea route to the Holy Land, and partly because he married there, and with this marriage slowly planned to obtain the kingdom of Navarre, as his bride, Berengaria, was daughter to King Sancho in the Toulouse and Carcassonne area. But I think we got a bit distracted by weddings, occupations and conquests, so we should return to the Third Crusade and Saladin in the Holy Land context. But Richard's siege of Jerusalem and Crusaders' campaign failed on first attempt due to hailstorms and heavy rain, and in 1192 the procedures of besiegers failed again. History repeated due to the leaders' failure to agree which city to siege, Jerusalem or Egypt, which split the Crusader army in two, those English and French Egypts. Despite a defeat for Saladin at the Battle of Jaffa, Richard worried about his brother John in England and considered returning home, as the future king was revolting, so signed a 3-year truce with Saladin, upholding access to Jerusalem for Christian pilgrims and merchants, then hurried back to England to quell the insurgents. The 12th century was meant to be a temple building century. Thanks a lot to Angkor Wat. Quintessentially, sing along, let's not forget the Southern Song Dynasty with their philosophy, technology, and their finest tea. And Saladin, man, he was mean. Unleashed speedy sieges, Jerusalem had to succumb, but he let them off with a ransom. Thomas of Beckett was murdered, just check it, in holy Canterbury. So Henry II was forced to do penance and answer his adversary. While there was something wrong in Jerusalem for Richard the Lionheart, as Saladin recaptured it and started to pry apart the Middle East, his force unleashed the savage adversary, Thomas of Becket was murdered, just check it, in holy Canterbury. A rift grew between Henry and Becket when he resigned his chancellorship and sought to recover and extend the rights of his bishopric, which led to a series of conflicts between Becket and the king, who wanted less clerical independence and a weaker coupling with Rome, the home of the Pope, as there were no clear distinctions between Catholic and Protestants before the Church of England. Unless you mean the Fraticelli, the Cathars and Waldensians, the sects of the Patharines, and the Albigensians. Anyway, back to Becket, back to Canterbury, back to Henry, who had grown incensed at the senseless despotism of Becket when he excommunicated the Archbishop of York, the Bishop of Salisbury and London, leaving Henry II, it's reckoned, with his regal powers undone. And frustrated, he is said to have uttered these words and angrily beseeched his court, it's thought, "Will no one rid me of this turbulent priest?" Interpreted as a royal decree, 4 knights set off for Canterbury. Hiding their swords under a tree, they boldly faced their adversary. When Becket refused the king's demands and calmly proceeded for Vespers, the knights, now armed, wielding their swords, demanded, "Where is the treacherous traitor to king and country?" And on finding him, monks bore witness to his brutal murder upon the cathedral floor. The faithful throughout Europe venerated him as a martyr, and later he was canonized, so Henry had to start a pilgrimage to Canterbury as penance. It remains a popular pilgrimage site. Read the Canterbury Tales. The 12th century was meant to be a temple building century. Thanks a lot to Angkor Wat. Quintessentially, sing along, let's not forget the Southern Song Dynasty with their philosophy, technology, and their finest tea. And Saladin, man, he was mean, unleashed speedy sieges. Jerusalem had to succumb, but he let them off with a ransom. Thomas of Becket was murdered, just check it, in holy Canterbury. So Henry II was forced to do penance and answer his adversary. And elsewhere across Europe, simultaneously, Università di Bologna, Université de Paris, settling in the Rive Gauche to study medicine or theology. They were an amorous lot, enjoying Bacchic revelry with students from Navarre, Aragon, Champagne, Rasca. Their common tongue was Latin. The Carmina Burana was part of their legacy of Goliardic literature. Oxford and Cambridge would join them a bit later. Moving away from Europe, China, the Middle East, the die is cast into the land of the rising sun and the birth of the samurai caste. The Kamakura Shogunate and Minamoto Yoritomo, the first ruling shogun in Japan, resplendent in black kimono. After 5 long years of civil war, the Minamoto defeated the Taira, and rising to a position of power, Yoritomo began to defy the emperor. And when he died in 1192, Yoritomo became shogun, creating a feudal state too. This can arise when a samurai, who is very high in forces, his law with all sorts of consorts who support his laws, and how they shall apply, they just comply with concord, otherwise contend with the business end of a samurai sword. He survived an assassination attempt later in a royal hunt, and relinquished his life of barbarity when ordained a Buddhist monk. So with Angkor Wat, the Southern Song, Université de Paris, Minamoto, Thomas Beckett, Richard and Saladin, welcome to the end of this century. Finally! But stay tuned to hear of the Battle of the Ice in the Solomonid Dynasty, Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan, the rise of Zimbabwe, Marco Polo, Magna Carta, the Albigensian Crusade. Say goodbye to the samurai deferentially and say hello to the Mongols of the 13th century.